He pressed the button for 5. The elevator blinked and passed it by. On the blueprint, the floor existed. In real life, it didn't. But in the shaft, someone could be heard knocking, and no one but him asked questions. Because questions meant seeing what shouldn't be there. The elevator that skipped a floor. Peter had worked in building maintenance since he was 23. He wasn't the type to fix things while being watched. He liked the early hours, when offices still slept, corridors buzzed with ventilation, and lights flickered on schedule. At those times, mistakes surfaced, and if you paid attention, you could hear an extra hum, catch the smell of burning, notice a crooked timer on a panel. He found them the way children find hidden compartments in the wall. The office building on Harbor Lane was like 1,000 others. 7 floors, 1 elevator, evacuation plans on every level. Yet here, for the first time, he felt that something in the layout didn't match reality. The 5th floor, it was on the blueprint, marked as utility space, allegedly closed for renovations. But something was odd. The elevator, even in manual override mode, refused to stop at 5. The program simply skipped it. No error, no alert, as if the number had been encoded as intermediate. One morning, Peter lingered by the elevator shaft. Everything inside looked standard. Cables, the rumble of mechanics, even the faint draft from the ventilation. But when the car passed between the 4th and 6th floors, he felt a tremor, as if something had been left behind. He checked the building's technical documents. There were photos of each floor. One was blurry, the 5th. As though the photo had been taken in haste, without focus, the ceiling lamp broken, the alarm covered in tape. Stranger still, the system had no record of that floor's decommission. No reasons, no dates. Peter raised his finger to the buttons. The numbers glowed evenly, except 5. It glowed faintly, as if the label had been scratched off and reapplied. He pressed it. Nothing happened. On Friday morning, Peter arrived earlier than usual, before sunrise. He brought a flashlight, a thermos of coffee, and an old laptop connected to the elevator control system via a long cable. Officially, he was testing morning calibration. Unofficially, he was investigating. The building's schematic on screen was simple. Blue rectangles labeled with floor numbers. Each had a tag for access, a temperature sensor, a camera. The 4th floor showed activity. Cleaning had begun at 5:14. The 6th, lights on in the conference room. But the 5th, it was there, on the plan. Yet it didn't breathe. 0 data, just void, like a drop of ink spilled between lines. Peter switched to archival drawings. He found the oldest one, dated 1998. The 5th floor was marked as record storage, restricted access. No square footage, no room layouts, just a blank rectangular zone and a handwritten note. Access level C. He squinted. None of the buildings he had worked in ever used that classification. Not for offices. He stood up, took an old emergency evacuation map from the cabinet and spread it across the desk. The 5th floor was there, with stairwells, which, as he knew for certain, skipped past that level in real life, as though a mask had been laid over them. The floor existed, but entry was sealed. He traced the line where the 4th ended and the 6th began, a blank strip between, like a gap. And then he saw it, a mark, barely visible, on the map copy, a tiny cross, right where the elevator door should have opened. He took a pencil and, without thinking, drew a question mark beside it. At that moment, somewhere in the building, the lights flickered. A power glitch? Or had someone seen him doing it? He approached the elevator. The panel still had no number 5, but from the shaft came the smell of dust, old paper, and something else, as if someone lived between the floors and was waiting. He scrolled to the bottom of the old blueprint. Beneath the building's stamp was a line of text. Harbor Facility B, Arch S. Levinson. He searched the name at random. Nothing. No other projects, no biography. As if the person had existed only here. As if the 5th floor had too. The next day, Peter went down to the service basement, officially to check the fire alarm system, unofficially to examine access to the elevator shaft from the lower level. He knew if the fifth floor didn't physically exist, that could be confirmed. But if it did and was hidden, there had to be access somewhere down here. The pipes hummed in the dim light. Old cables hung low overhead. The air smelled of mildew and machine oil. Peter walked past the transformer room and stopped at the access panel. He entered his code in a rusty metal cabinet with the main relays open. Among them was the button for manual override, authorization to move the elevator cabin between floors with millimeter precision. He paused at the panel. He could have just shut everything down, blamed it on a system glitch, closed the cabinet, finished his coffee, and forgotten about it. But in the silence, it became clear. If he walked away now, someone would stay there, nameless, for another 20 years. He connected his laptop to the control box and began the test. The elevator moved from the first to the second floor, normal, then from the fourth to the sixth, as expected. But when he entered a manual position in between, exactly 500, the screen flickered. Access denied. Security override. Peter froze. That error shouldn't exist. Ordinary buildings didn't use such restrictions. He tried a slightly lower value, 4.95. The elevator motor rattled for a second, then fell silent. A new line appeared. Manual halt. Unregistered floor. He climbed back to the shaft. Through a small side window, a technical inspection glass, he looked inside. The elevator cabin stood still, facing a bare concrete wall. And yet, Peter turned on his flashlight. Against the gray concrete, he saw a subtle change in texture, an outline, as if behind the panel a door frame was hidden, its edges crudely plastered over. He slowly traced the glass with his finger, then noticed someone had scratched a word from the inside. Still here. The letters were uneven, the scratches deep, as if made with a coin or a nail. Peter stepped back. There shouldn't have been anyone behind that wall. No light, no entry. But through the glass, he caught a flicker of movement, a barely visible shadow. And again, that scent. Old paint, paper, and lemon tea. Peter didn't sleep that night. He scoured old architecture forms, technical blueprints, fire safety directives, even anonymous threads for elevator engineers. But nowhere was there an explanation of how a building with 7 floors could have an 8th removed from access. No official note about dismantling, closing, or reconstructing the 5th. Just emptiness, a technical silencer between levels. In the morning, he returned to the basement, this time with a tiny camera on a flexible cable. Through the inspection opening in the shaft, he once again sent a manual command and stopped the elevator at the in-between mark. The wall at level 5.00 remained concrete, but now he knew something was behind it. He slowly inserted the camera into the gap between technical panels. The image on the laptop flickered. It was shaky, striped, but after a moment, the picture cleared. A room, narrow with a low ceiling, shelves along the walls, folders, dusty books, a desk lamp with a green shade, and a table. On the table, a glass cup filled with amber liquid. A slice of lemon floated on the surface. Peter froze. The image wasn't archival, it was a live feed. He felt uneasy. His heart pounded sideways, heat rushed to his ears. His fingers trembled on the trackpad. Even the ventilation hum seemed louder, like someone was breathing beside him. He took a screenshot and clicked save. And then a hand appeared in the frame. Female, slender. It lifted the cup and vanished from view. The camera crackled and shut off. He sat in silence for 10 minutes, then got up, disconnected the system, and stepped into the hallway. There in the corner beneath the stairs, he saw an empty tea bag, tossed away but not crumpled. Lemon. He picked it up and suddenly understood. The building had no cafeteria, no kitchen, no tea dispensers. No one ever brought mugs with lemon. No one except who? He clenched the tea bag in his fist. Now he didn't just know someone was there. He knew that someone was waiting. On Monday, Peter arrived with a new plan. He didn't request time off, just put on his work jacket, grabbed his tools, and climbed the stairs to the 4th floor. He ignored the elevator. The air on the floor carried a faint scent of fresh paint, as if someone had recently touched up the walls. He walked down the corridor, pacing his steps along the blueprint. As before, the wall where the exit to the fifth should have been was solid. But at the base, near the floor, he noticed a ventilation grate. Too new, too shiny. He unscrewed it, reached inside, and found a thick sheet of paper. A folded envelope, yellowed with time. No stamp, no address, just neatly inked initials. E.H. Peter unfolded the letter. The handwriting was thin, feminine. The message, brief. If someone is reading this, it means you haven't forgotten. I'm not here by choice. I was written off, but never dismissed. They said this area is closed, but I stayed. Every day I make tea. Every day I hope someone opens the door. I don't need noise, just recognition that I was here. Signed, Elaine Harper, Records Department. At first, Peter didn't notice how quiet the basement had become. Even the humming pipes seemed to pause as he read. The words were simple, but the shadows in the corners thickened. Or maybe he had just stopped ignoring them. He stood with the letter in his hand until he heard a dull sound above him. Footsteps, overhead, where there was supposed to be nothing. He returned to the basement and manually restarted the elevator. At level 4.97, he slowed the cabin, then issued the emergency door command. The panel trembled and slid aside with a rasp. Beyond it, a narrow darkness opened. Peter shone his flashlight into the gap. A staircase, rusty, narrow, leading upward into the heart of the fifth floor. He stepped forward, 1 foot, then another, and saw the door. It had no handle, only a plaque nailed in place. Records, do not enter. And beside it, a glass cup, empty but still warm. Peter came home with the letter still in his pocket. He placed it beside his mug and just stared at it. The name, Elaine Harper. He knew it. Not from meeting her, but because he had once seen it downstairs, on an old archive label stuck to a dusty folder in the supply room. That night, he went back, opened the same folder. On the inner cover was a name tag, Harper E., and a date, 2003, more than 20 years ago. He flipped through the pages. Inside were staff rosters, internal memos, transfer requests. The last entry, a formal plea for reassignment due to psycho-emotional overload. There was no reply. No approved, no denied. Just the next order, department dissolved. But Elaine's name hadn't vanished. It remained on the list of active personnel. Every annual audit, even through 2021, she was listed as currently assigned. No termination, no record of death, just suspended between the lines. Peter printed the letter, placed it in a clean envelope. Inside the building, there was an old feedback box, once used for suggestions, now forgotten. He dropped the letter in, not addressed to anyone in particular, just so it wouldn't exist only in his hands. 2 days later, the box was gone. And a week after that, a notice appeared inside the elevator. Reopening of archives expected soon. No signature, no stamp, just a page taped to the panel. Peter tried once more to ride to the fifth floor. The system again refused access, but this time, the number 5 on the display lit evenly, not faint, as if someone had restored it. That same day, he found a small object in his bag, a glass cup, just like the one in the shaft. He didn't know who had put it there, but at the bottom was a trace of lemon and a tiny piece of paper. Thank you, I am on the list again. He held the cup gently. The base was still warm, as if someone had just poured the tea. But on the glass, there was a crack, one that hadn't been there in the morning, a wavy line tracing the curve like a lifeline. He placed the cup in a cupboard and shut the door tight. He never told anyone about it, because now he knew not everything that exists can be seen. But if you don't disappear, you might bring someone else back into view. Spring came unexpectedly. The building on Harbor Lane was washed clean by the rain. The windows gleamed brighter than usual, and the elevator now moved smoothly, without jerks. Peter had gone back to arriving early, not out of curiosity, but out of habit. He no longer tried to reach the fifth floor. It was like a hidden compartment you shouldn't open twice. One morning, he stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the fourth floor, and without thinking, added the sixth. The elevator moved, past them both. But between the two levels, there was a pause. Barely half a second of silence, as if someone on the other side of the wall was listening. He smiled, and only then noticed that in the right-hand corner of the cabin, placed neatly without a speck of dust, was a fresh sheet of paper. No envelope, just two lines. Not all floors are for everyone, but if someone remembers, the door will not remain shut. He folded the note carefully, the way you might fold a banknote, and slipped it into his pocket. Without surprise, without fear. It had become part of the building's rhythm, part of its quiet, just like he had. That same day, he stopped by the storage room. On the top shelf were old items, broken lamps, boxes of wires. Among them, a folder with no label. Inside it was a single sheet, a printout of an old staff list. The name Harper was highlighted in yellow, and next to it, someone had written in pen, active, marked present. Peter looked up at the ceiling, as if the floor above might hear. Then he closed the folder and put it back. As he turned to leave, he switched off the light. But when he glanced back, the desk lamp on the shelf had lit up by itself. Warm, green shade. The light was faint but steady. He never tried to reach the fifth again. But he noticed, in the maintenance logs, a new field had appeared. Interfloor indicators. No one knew who had added it. But names began to appear. Names that hadn't been there before. And from that day on, he never complained about the extra pause between floors. He understood now. Someone was still working in that gap. Not for the system, but to make sure at least someone stayed where they belonged.